So in today's video, I want to talk about sexual intimacy and pleasure. I don't know how often we talk about pleasure, but God made it, right, for marriage, sexual intimacy and pleasure in marriage. And so even when I say that word pleasure, some of you are already triggered and want to turn off the video, right? But if you'd be willing to stick with me, I'd love to talk through 2 or 3 or 4 points on pleasure. So what is your relationship with pleasure? When I say the word pleasure in the context of marriage with your spouse, sexually. When I used to think of the word pleasure, shame would definitely be what came up. Like that was a word that I didn't even want to say out loud. Like I didn't use the word pleasure. And as I've connected with Skylar and understood the heart of the Lord, I believe he desires for you to have great, great pleasure in intimacy inside your marriage. And so for you, are you open to pleasure? Do you seek pleasure in sexual intimacy? Or do you make it all about your husband if you're a woman? Because I've talked to many ladies and they might not have said out loud that they believed that sexual pleasure was for their husband, but they weren't making themselves a priority in pleasure in marriage. I remember being at a Bible study and the topic of orgasms came up, and totally awkward, right? Especially if you have shame around sex and talking about it, which I definitely used to. And all the ladies went around and they had to have been lying, right? Because I there's just so many books, but they had to have been, my story that I've made up is they've been lying, but they all said, oh yeah, I orgasm every time with my husband. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I don't, right? And then that wasn't even in my consciousness. I was like, oh my gosh. I went back home and I talked to Skylar and I was like, hey, like all these ladies said they're orgasming every time when they're intimate. And that wasn't even in my consciousness. Like I didn't even know that that was a possibility. And so unknowingly, I had uncovered this belief that sex was for him and pleasure in sex was for him and that he was supposed to finish each time, but I wasn't a priority at that. And so I approached it in this dutiful way. And I would imagine that that's not as fun for him when I'm doing it out of duty, right? Or doing it out of obligation or doing it to make sure he doesn't wander, right? He shared, like, I want this to be pleasurable for both of us, right? But I had brought into the relationship a bunch of shame around that. And it's like this just consciousness that I was doing it for him. I just had no clue that it was possible that pleasure was meant, like pleasure in sex in marriage was meant for both of us. And so part of us stepping into that was checking into, do we do that? Is our sexual routine stale? Like, do I do the same thing over and over again? Or are we bringing newness and life and intentionality into our intimacy, right? Fun stuff, right? Trying new things. There's one thing, we're at a marriage event while I'm recording this, and there's one thing that I love called the game of love. And it gives all these different ideas of just how to connect and have fun and be intimate and just bring newness and life. And so for you, are you doing the same old thing over and over again? And is it getting stale? And do you need to bring some newness, right? Do you desire to continue to get better intimately? There has to be this intentionality, just like in everything, right? If you go to the gym and you work out, you're trying to improve your fitness. There's so many things in life. If you run a business, you're intentional in making the business the best that it can be. And is your sex life something that you're intentional on making it the best that it can be? And I know that some of you have abuse in your past, and it's a source of shame. And what greater person to work through that with than your spouse, right? If you can create an environment where there's a safe space for you to lean into things that no one else in the world you get to lean into with. Because it just creates this intimacy. Like, I feel known by Skylar in a way that no one else knows me. But for those of you that are not there at all, I want you to know that I was once there. Skylar had a conversation with me years ago and was like, how can we improve our sex life, right? And one of the things that came out of that conversation was me looking at him while we were having sex. I used to completely disassociate from the experience that we were having. I was 100% not present. And I'm thankful for healing in that area and that we do have connection. But no matter where you're starting, I believe it starts with intentionality. Can I be intentional in healing things of the past so that I can lean in more into the future and create the best experience? Because if I'm going to do it anyways, if you're going to do it anyways, why not make it the best that it can be? It was going to be like that always? No. Do we go through seasons, right, where there's more stress, or we age, or we go through health things and like just our bodies change as we get older? 100%. But if you're going to do it, why not do it to the best of your ability at each given moment and in each season of life that you're in? So I hope this helps. If anything stuck out, I'd love for you to comment below. And there's more videos on intimacy and connection I'd love for you to check out. And if you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe, and I'll see you soon.